Alright, so today I want to show you the last few snakes that I'm going to post over on Morphmarket. And this is pretty much the third batch of snakes I'm posting over there. And I'm finding out pretty quick that it is really difficult to recoup all of your expenses when you're selling snakes over on the internet. You have a lot of hidden expenses. You have the expenses for paying for Morphmarket. You have the boxing and the shipping costs and all that stuff. As a matter of fact, if I tried to recoup all my costs, wouldn't be really competitive over on Morphmarket. So pretty much what I've done is pretty much do what everyone else does. I've reduced my prices, reduced my shipping costs down to where it is competitive, and just kind of taken the hit on some of the snakes. And it's funny because when you first start selling at the reptile shows, you start thinking, you know, it'd be much easier to actually ship these out instead of paying for the display cases and the tables and standing there at the shows for 2 days. And then you actually get on the other side of things when you start shipping out snakes and you realize there's almost more expenses over on the shipping side. Makes you think that you might be a little better off actually selling at the reptile shows, which is pretty amazing. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you the last few snakes that I'm going to post over on Morphmarket. Alright, so I'm going to start out with this snake. This is Pluto. He is a male 50% het pied, and you can actually take a look at the belly to see if you think they're het pied. If you take a look at this one, the tracks on the belly, I can almost guarantee this one is going to be het pied just because of the tracks right here along the belly. Really strong pied markers on this one. Sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't, and I'd say on this one, there's a really good chance that this one is definitely het pied, even though from the breeding we know it's 50% het pied. Alright, so this one we named Luna, and Luna came from the same clutch. This is actually a female, 50% het pied on this one. And if we take a look at the belly on this one, you can kind of see that there's not the really strong pied markers on this one. And if it doesn't have the pied markers, I'd say it's not. You can't really tell for sure. You just know that there's pretty much a 50-50 chance as far as this one. It may or may not be het pied. This one's a really kind of a more of a yellow color than most of the normals I see. It's kind of an interesting looking snake. Alright, so take a look at this beauty. This is a coral glow. This one we named Stormy, and Stormy is a coral glow, 50% het pied. Actually came from the same clutch, but actually got the coral glow gene. Actually the father was a coral glow, 100% het pied, and the father on this one was a male maker, meaning every coral glow that produced is actually a male. This one's a male. This one is also a male maker because the parent was a male coral glow. So if you actually took this snake and you bred it to like a normal ball python, 50% of the babies would come out as coral glows, and every single coral glow in that clutch would be a male. And I've been breeding my coral glow for quite a few years now. I have yet to actually get a female coral glow out of that guy. And I'd say this is really, I'd say as far as the line of coral glow, this is probably one of the most impressive as hatchlings. I haven't seen any coral glows as intense as this. Really awesome colors. Unfortunately, when they mature, they kind of lose some of this blue, lighter blue color in the middle, and it turns a little bit more yellow, and it kind of almost turns into like a two-tone yellow. And then a lot of the little freckles all through the snake actually really intensify, and it gets a lot more freckles as it matures. Really awesome morph. And usually the bellies on these are completely clear. You really can't tell if there's het pied in there or not, but there's a 50% chance that this one actually carries one copy of the recessive pied gene. Alright, so take a look at this beauty. This is Frosty. We named it Frosty, and Frosty is a male. This is a pinstripe, and it's actually a double het recessive. So I actually took my albino pied visual and I bred it with my pinstripe female. And then this one actually got the pinstripe gene, and it's het for albino and het for pied. So we know it's 100% sure that 100% het for albino, 100% het for pied. Really powerful breeder. And if you actually bred this one to another double het or maybe another albino pied, essentially what you would get is you get albinos, you get pieds, you get albino pieds, and then you get like a pinstripe pied, pinstripe albinos, pinstripe albino pieds. You get a whole bunch of different snakes from this amazing animal. Alright, so this one we named Snuggles. Snuggles came from the same clutch as the last one, but didn't get the pinstripe. So this is a male, 100% het albino, 100% het pied. And we don't even have to look at the belly on this one because we know for sure that it is het pied. You can definitely see the pied markers down the belly on this one, really strong. And if you notice on a lot of these snakes, when I first handled these maybe a month ago, they were really kind of in that snappy mood and they're biting everything. And all of a sudden, it seems like a lot of them really mellowed out and they're really getting super, I would say not maybe super mellow, but they're getting a little bit more mellow than they were before. Plus, I've had them at a couple shows, so a lot of people have actually picked them up and handled them, and I've done quite a few videos. This guy's just taking off all over the place. But this would make a really powerful breeder too, the same as the last snake. Alright, so here's another one from the same clutch. This is a female we named Bigfoot. And Bigfoot is actually 100% het albino, 100% het pied. Didn't get the pinstripe gene like the other one got, but it's a really powerful breed. As a matter of fact, if you just mix this one with another male that was double het, they both look completely normal, but you would get albinos, you'd get pieds, and you will get albino pieds out of the mix. And anything that doesn't get any of those visuals would actually be 66% het. So you have a pretty good chance of actually hitting the odds if you breed two of these double recessives together. Alright, so here's another one. This is Peekaboo, and Peekaboo is a female, 100% het albino, 100% het pied. Had quite a few double hets in that clutch. This one's actually getting really big for a female. I'd say it's got a really good jump start on actually getting to the point where you actually can breed this one. This is what the belly looks like. And so far, I haven't taken a bite from any of these. It seemed like these double recessive, double het albino pieds were really snappy when they were a bit younger. And now they're really mellowing out. I haven't taken a bite for quite a while on these hatchlings. I'm doing pretty good. Finally getting out of that snappy stage, and they're getting into the stage where they could really tame down and be really nice pets. Alright, so here's another one. We named this one Starbuck. This is another female, 100% het albino, 100% het pied. And the interesting thing is, on some of these you can actually see almost it looks like a slight pattern reduction, almost close to an inchy. Well, let me tell you, I don't think there's any inchy in here. I think it's just a little bit jumbled up pattern because of the double recessive. And this is what it looks like on the belly here. Another good looking female. This one actually, as well as that last one, looks like they're well on their way to actually getting up to breeding size. Probably still take another year or so, maybe a year and a half to actually get them to the size where they actually could breed and lay some eggs. Alright, so here is another beautiful pinstripe. This one we named Meatball. And Meatball is another double het albino, het pied, and a pinstripe on top of that. Really powerful breeder. As a matter of fact, if you took this and bred it to one of those female double hets, you get a whole variety of a whole bunch of stuff. This is what the belly looks like. Pretty clear belly with just a few little spots right down the belly. Really interesting snake. I absolutely love these pinstripes. I'd say it's probably one of my favorite morphs. Really underrated, mixes really well with a lot of genes, and it's a really bright gold color. The other thing I like about pinstripes is they're pretty inexpensive. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get into something really spectacular. Alright, so here's the last one from that clutch. This one we named Titan. Titan is a normal double het albino, het pied. Came from that albino pied pairing with my pinstripe. Didn't get the pinstripe. And this is what the belly looks like, and it's kind of interesting. On some of these, you can definitely tell it has some pretty strong het pied markers. Not quite as strong as I'd like to see down on the bottom. It's kind of interesting looking at some of the snakes that we know for sure are het pied, and then comparing some of those to the ones we think are 50%. You can kind of get an idea of which ones may carry the het pied. Sometimes you can tell on the belly tracks. But you can see on this one too, not a lot of alien heads, which is kind of interesting. It looks like there's a little influence over the pattern with that double het albino pied, which is kind of interesting. All right, so take a look at this. This is another pinstripe. We named this one Goldie. Goldie is a female. This actually came from a different clutch, so this one is a pinstripe, 100% het desert ghost. And if you haven't seen the desert ghost stuff, I think it's absolutely phenomenal if you actually get a visual. So desert ghost is recessive. You actually need 2 copies of the gene to actually get the visual. And I got into the project. Desert ghosts are still pretty expensive. I've been into it for a couple years now, and I think this is the first year where I'm actually going to get some visual desert ghosts, hopefully if my female will lay. I produced a bunch of hets this year just in case you want to get in kind of on a budget. You can buy the hets a lot less than buying the visual desert ghosts. All right, so this one we named Spot, S-P-O-T, not to be confused with Spock, S-P-O-C-K. I actually named 2 snakes really close together, and I get the names mixed up. So this one is named Spot, even though it really doesn't have spots all over it. This one is actually a Lemon Blast, 100% het desert ghost. And some people are thinking there's actually some Enchi in here. I think maybe my male visual pastel desert ghost might have some Enchi in it. This looks really different than a lot of the Lemon Blasts that I've actually produced. A really reduced pattern. I would say this almost looks like it might have Enchi, although I'm not 100% sure that it's kind of an Enchi that may be floating around, so I'm not going to say 100% sure that this has Enchi, and I'm just going to list it as a pastel pinstripe 100% het desert ghost. This is a male. And if you take a look at the belly, that's what the belly looks like. This would be a really powerful breeder. An awesome pet too. All right, so this one we named Spock, S-P-O-C-K, not to be confused with Spock. And Spock is a female, super pastel, 100% het desert ghost. And this one, I'd say this is probably the only one that's kind of an exception as far as all my other snakes. This one has been a little bit feisty, probably tends to bite me a little bit more than the other ones. And the other thing on this one, it seems like this one has a really hard time taking frozen thawed or fresh killed. Seems like this one's always, for some reason, seems like it's alive only up to this point. I think maybe once I fed it a fresh kill and it took it, maybe once or twice, but I'd say in most cases this one's kind of stuck on live. I've been doing either live mice or the live little tiny rats, and for some reason I just can't get it over to frozen thawed. I think because it's maybe because it's afraid of me, and sometimes when you get snakes that are just kind of a little bit snappy, a little bit scared of you, and you don't really, I don't know, it seems like maybe we got off on the bad foot, and it's for some reason, you know, especially with snakes that are a little bit kind of snappy at you, it seems like they only do live. It's kind of interesting. You can almost see that it's kind of giving me the evil eye, like it's trying to figure me out, like it maybe will take a bite at me. But I'd say this is kind of the exception over all my snakes. This is probably the only one that is, you know, you buy it with caution. I would say if you actually held this guy for a long time, you know, maybe an hour or two, you could probably calm him down quite a bit. It's just a matter of not really socializing him enough. But it's kind of interesting how every snake kind of has its own certain personality. And this one is kind of an exception as far as all my other hatchlings. And usually hatchlings are a little more easily convinced that you're a friend instead of a foe, versus if you had an older snake that was a little bit more snappy. I'd say you could probably get this one to calm down a lot if you just worked with it and held it and build that trust. And if you wonder what the belly looks like, this is what it looks like. Super pastels are pretty clear. And this is 100% het desert ghost, so everything you breed this to would be pastel, and then there'd be a 50% chance it could get a copy of the desert ghost gene. Really awesome snake. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about holding this one back, and I'm holding back like 7 snakes this year, and I just can't hold them all back because I don't really want to expand that much. And as a matter of fact, this year I think I'm going to produce a bunch of clowns, some visual clowns, and I want to hold a lot of those back. So I'm not sure how far I want to expand, and that was kind of the tipping point. Do I really want to have one more snake as a holdback? I was kind of on the edge, but I decided to let this one go. All right, so here is the last snake that I want to show you. Pretty much all my other ones are already over on Morphmarket. And this one we named Fluffy. Fluffy is a male pastel 100% het desert ghost. Really good looking snake. And this is another one that I was kind of thinking of maybe holding back. It's a really awesome example of pastel. Really reduced pattern. And if we take a look at the belly here, the belly looks really kind of almost like a, I know it's kind of hard to see on the camera, but almost the belly looks yellow, which is, you can definitely tell this is a really intense line of yellow. You can see really kind of a bright yellow coming through the belly. And the pastels, I'd say normally they fade out quite a bit as they get older. They kind of brown out a little bit, but if you actually get the visual desert ghost with the pastel, that does not brown out and it stays really bright the entire life of the snake. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Sean Stegman asks, what is the easiest way to get my male ball python back on food after the breeding season? And that is a very good question. I'd say that's probably the number one question that most people have coming out of the breeding season. How do I get my males and females back on food? And I would say for the males, it's not really that big of a deal, because if a male doesn't have that many meals, it can still jump right into the next breeding season. I think most people are really focused on the females. Most people will say the female needs at least 10 good size rats to go from where she's laying eggs to entering into the next breeding season. So everyone's trying to get as many rats as they can into their females before the next breeding season. And if they're off of food, you know, if you're kind of up against the wall where they don't eat before the next season, essentially what you have to do is you have to give them the year off and then try to get them back up to weight over the span of a whole year, essentially. So I'd say there's a few tricks to actually getting them to eat. Probably the number one thing is you want to give your snake a bath. Actually take all the smells from the breeding season off the snake. Another thing you want to do is jump into the enclosure, change all the substrate, scrub down the walls and everything and all the decorations and everything. Completely scrub and clean everything. And a lot of times that alone will trigger some of your snakes back into feeding. Another thing you can try, which I don't really like to do unless it's kind of a last resort, and that is to feed a live rodent. You can actually, especially if you're used to doing frozen thawed, you can just try one live rodent to kind of jumpstart them into feeding again, and then try to go back to the frozen thawed or whatever you used to. But I'd say that's probably the biggest trick that I use is I take a small live rat and I'll put it in there just for one feeding, and if they actually take it, then I'll switch back to the frozen thawed, or in my case I do a lot of fresh kill. I euthanize with CO2 instead of doing the frozen thawed. But either way, I would say that is probably the easiest. Change it up. Another thing you can try is try to go to mice if you're used to feeding rats. A lot of times they'll take mice a lot easier. The only problem is you definitely don't want to get them stuck on live or mice, or you can also try like African soft furs or something like that. You can try those, but I would definitely only try 1 or 2 meals and then go back to rats as soon as you can. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.